Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. So good to be on with you. Yesterday, I talked about the Syrian persecution with our good friend Mike Koniger. And today, I saw there was an article over at the National Catholic Register that seemed to indicate that maybe people like me were overplaying that. Maybe there isn't as big of a deal about the Christians being persecuted in Syria. Maybe it was just simply Muslim on Muslim violence. I want to play this clip for you from News Nightly at EWT and have a listen to this.
Is there any reason to believe that the Christians were targeted for their faith?
First of all, there are confirmed reports of very few Christians killed. Now, one death is a terrible tragedy, and there are not many Christians left in Syria. But there's a confirmation of maybe 4 people that we know for sure. Others talk about 8 people.
I find that fascinating, considering how many clips I was watching online of people actually crying foul that saying, hey, Christians were being persecuted. And they claim that the numbers were much higher. But if I want to know what's going on around the world, I always ask my friend Edward Clancy from Aid to the Church in Need, because he has, and that organization has a careful eye on Christian persecution around the world. And he joins us this morning. Edward, good morning to you. Thank you for your time today. So what is your take on Syria in the last several days?
I think it's somewhere in between, in that we do not know a particular number. And, Aid to the Church in Need is primarily not a news organization. We are an organization that supports the church in its efforts to help the people. So the area of northwestern Syria that was affected did have, for now, a higher concentration of Christians as compared to some of the other minorities. The principal target of this had been the Alawites, it seems. Mm-hmm. The Alawites are the tribe or the group or the sect of Islam from which Assad is from. And so they seem to be the target, but the issue always is not who the target is, but who also are affected. And, as often is the case, the Christians get in the middle. So a couple of things to understand about the Alawites. The Alawites are a sect of Shia Islam. They are different in other parts of Islam in that their practices also include the consumption of wine for the ceremonial religious events. And they don't particularly forbid the consumption of alcohol. So in many ways, especially among the Sunni and the ISIS-like forces, they're considered, non-Muslims. So that's a major component of it. The other thing is that because Christians, for most of the Assad regime, had been a somewhat protected minority, even though they did not live a wonderfully free life under Assad, that they also are considered, part of the Assad regime because they were protected. So now the new government, if you'll call it that, I think what we discussed this weeks ago, after the overthrow of the government, that this is a very fractious and very sort of small group that has control of Syria right now, and the big players are in Syria are Turkey and obviously Israel to the south. And so all of these things have come to create a very toxic environment in Syria, a very unstable environment, especially for the minorities. And the Christians there have been very, I want to say hopeful. They were cautiously non-worried. I don't know how else to put it. They weren't really happy, but they were hopeful that things would get better. Now, the Christians, as far as those who have been killed, like the guest on EWTN said, we have no confirmation. So Aid to the Church in Need won't say, oh, we know that there were 4 dead or 8 dead or 100 or whatever. We do know that there were Christians in the area. We do know that the church on the ground is saying that it's a very sensitive, delicate situation, that the violence must stop. The positive things that have happened is that the government, because it's small, has moved to stop the violence, or at least they show that to have been done. And the other thing is that, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to interrupt. I think there's a lot of bad bad characters that are involved in the process too that might look for opportunities. The Chechens, the Al Qaeda, the ISIS terrorists that are working for this government that's there now. Certainly, when they find, and there was I have to tell you, I will not show it, I will not link to it, but I saw a horrific video. They crucified a man, and then they shot him in the head with an AK-47 twice.
Yeah.
It was the most disturbing thing I had seen in I can't remember how long. And I've seen some stuff. I got to tell you, why would you crucify a man? It's because you're mocking his Christian faith. So was he one of the 8? I don't know. But it just like there's clearly lots of stuff going around the internet. And it's always hard to know what's fact or fiction. But I can tell you the Chechens, the Al Qaedas that are the elements there, they don't probably care much about what their leader in Damascus is saying or not saying to do or to focus their violent attentions. They're going to take every opportunity they can. And clearly, I think they have, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely. And with the example of the Chechens, they're unfortunately well known for their viciousness in these mercenary activities. A friend of mine said that if you see that the Muslim radical that's coming at you has light skin, red hair, looks European, then the biggest concern is that they're Chechen, and there was a sort of vicious nature of these mercenary groups that have come out of Chechnya, as we have seen in their battles with Russia, who is another player in this. And now, even though Russia pulled out, and because they did not back Assad, it was the main essentially cause of the Assad regime collapsing. Aside from maybe the backing of Iran, they have pushed for peace. Just this morning, there was an announcement that the Kurds, who are in the northeast, another group who are seeking control, and they control the oil-rich region of Syria, that they signed an agreement with the new government, creating a peace or a détente, if you will. So there are a lot of. The thing is that the Christians are the only community there really that have no backers. They have no support. They have no military. That makes them very vulnerable. So even in the cases of ISIS, Christians were not the principal target necessarily, but they certainly were targets. The principal targets were to subjugate the weak and to take control of all of the minority groups. And at that time, the Christians weren't necessarily, as the super focus. So if you look at Syria from years ago, the Christians and the Alawites, the two minority communities, had about between 8 and 10% each of the population. And so when they were in a government of Syria, the Syrian government, the country of Syria, was held together because of Assad's control. It is a very fractious group. There are many there's Druze, there's Alawites, there's Levantine, there's all sorts of other different small groups, all tribes that make up Syria, and it makes it for a very combustible atmosphere. So right now in Syria, the control is in Damascus, at least by the virtue of its presence on the international stage. But on the outskirts, in those places, the northeast and the northwest, it's not controlled by them. They have to rely on these relationships to keep the peace. And in the northwest, unfortunately, there are a lot of these groups that will attack, and so the Christians have been leaving. And that's another reason why Christians aren't a focus anymore, aren't a target, because the numbers have dwindled so much. It's probably gone down by 75%. So those pockets of Christians are no longer there. There's not a great number of them, but there certainly were Christians that were attacked, and there certainly were, horrible things done. We're not going to use a number, but we know that we have gotten requests for prayers. We have gotten many requests from people on the ground on the very edges of this violence to say that it's very dangerous and they're not going out. That's another thing that'll happen. There's no violence, but if you can't get out of your house, if there's limited supplies, the economy is bad. You now have people shut in their homes without food, without water, just hunkering down and trying to survive, and until desperation. And then if you go out into one of these frays, who are you? It doesn't really matter if you're a Christian, you're a Druze, you're an Alawite, you're a target. And that's our major concern right now, is to deal with those issues so that people can have some normalcy, and that there's enough peace for them to have a normal life, even if it forces them to leave that part of Syria or even Syria.
Do we know where they're going to? Where are they running for cover?
Well, generally, Christians are going to the safe havens. There is the area near Lebanon called the Valley of the Christians, which has the highest concentration. So in numbers, there's safety. There's also, still some going to Lebanon, even though the situation in Lebanon is not good. And those who have had the means probably are leaving the country altogether. We've had so many stories, especially during ISIS, of people from Syria moving to Iraq because it was safer, and then moving from Iraq to Lebanon, and then moving away there because the situation in Lebanon, 1/3 of the population are displaced people or refugees. So you have so much going on there it makes it difficult for them to say there's any normalcy. And this is why there's a great fear that Christianity will be lost in this area of the world. The place, Syria, where the word Christian first came into being, Damascus. Remember, where was Paul going? What was Damascus to Israel at the time of Jesus? It was a major center, and it always has been. The northern part of where Aleppo is, you have, that was the Silk Road. It was a place where cultures came together, where commerce happened, where there was business, there was opportunity. These are all the things in the Syrian Christians' minds of how Syria should be, how Syria was, and the Syria that, in a sense, that they wanted to go back to. So the situation there is fractious. It is, it's not good, and yet at the same time, we see these glimmers of hope, and we can't help but think, okay, if there's peace with the Kurds, if there is a quelling of the violence, and there's not all of this activity, that there can be some normalcy. But it's going to take 2 generations or 3 generations for there be any sort of normalcy.
Well, I was glad for one thing. It did seem, I asked the question, does anybody care? It seemed like yesterday a lot of people cared. There were even outlets that reported on it that typically wouldn't. So I was very, very happy to see that the word was getting around. Praise be to God.
Hey, if you like this kind of content, I'd be super grateful if you would consider buying me a coffee. I'll put a link below, and on your way down, smash that subscribe and check out this video right here, because you're not going to want to miss anything.